Right now, the global trend is that rich are pulling ahead while the middle classes struggle to keep up. This shift matters because it challenges assumptions about economic stability and equality in advanced welfare states such as Denmark. The latest global research shows that the total wealth is becoming more concentrated at the top, while middle income groups see only marginal gains. And actually, Denmark is no exception, even though we usually think of Denmark as a society of fairness and equality. Today, we are breaking down what's really happening, why the middle class is stalling, and what this trend could mean for the future in Denmark. Economic inequality is the gap in income and wealth distribution between different segments of society. In Denmark, the overall inequality score has long been among the lowest in developed nations. But recent data suggests that the top income groups are now pulling even further ahead. One analysis found that the richest segment of the population saw gains far above inflation, while average incomes barely budged. Another study found that the income gap has grown significantly over the past decades. In simple terms, people at the very top are earning much more than they did before. While the typical worker's real income has been squeezed by rising costs, generally speaking, people with money have seen capital gains in higher stock prices and increases in real estate prices. At the same time, low and medium income groups haven't had the same opportunities to invest, all the while they are battling with the rising costs. This creates pressure on the middle class, a group that has historically anchored stability in Denmark and also in Europe. So, what drives this shift? First, global capital flows and rising asset values help those with investments and property far more than wage earners. Second, automation and technological changes tend to benefit capital owners, not traditional jobs, showing wage growth for many years. One example is AI. If you leverage AI and you're developing AI, you might be earning quite a lot for bringing that technology to the market. While if you are on the receiving end of AI, you might have difficulties stepping up and you might even be replaced by AI. Third, inflation has eroded the purchasing power of wages, especially for those not in the top income brackets. Finally, even with progressive tax systems, redistributive policies can lag behind rapid changes in wealth accumulation, meaning policy tools don't fully corner the trend. Together, those forces make it harder for middle-income households to move up the economic ladder. But why should we as a society in Denmark really care about the stalling middle class? Economists see the middle class as the backbone of consumer demand, civic engagement, and economic resilience, so it's also the backbone of democracy. If this group stops growing, income shifts towards the top could also slow broad-based economic activity. Uneven growth also tends to compress social mobility, meaning it becomes harder for future generations to improve their standards of living. And while Denmark still has a strong social safety net, even modest increases in inequality can put strain on public systems and community cohesion. For example, we can see it with the higher cost of purchasing real estate in Denmark, making it difficult for newer generations to come to the bigger cities and get a job, start a family, and so on and so forth. That creates a gap between the older generation that benefits from these price increases and the younger generations who cannot enter the market. As Denmark is part of Europe, it's also important to see this in a wider European context. Across the EU, many countries are reporting similar middle-class stagnation alongside rising inequality trends. That doesn't mean collapse, but it does mean policymakers will have to balance growth with fairness more carefully. So what are the policy options on the table? When it comes to policy options for mitigating this rising inequality, there isn't a single magic lever, but a mix of targeted reforms that research suggests can shift outcomes. One clear area is tax systems designed to be more progressive, meaning higher effective rates on higher incomes while protecting lower income earners. Progressive taxation has a demonstrable effect on redistributing income and reducing inequality in advanced economies, according to the OECD. In many OECD countries, tax and benefit systems already cut inequality substantially, but this redistributive impact weakened in recent decades as market incomes have pulled further apart. That tells us that adjusting tax brackets and closing loopholes to ensure top earners contribute fairly is very important. A closely related idea is capital taxation, but broad net wealth taxes have proved tricky to implement in practice. Many countries repealed them because they raised little revenue, were costly to administer, and sometimes disencouraged investment. Instead, policymakers often focus on capital gains and dividend tax alignment so that passive wealth gains are taxed more similarly to labor income. In Denmark, some suggestions have been raised to tax capital gains on real estate, but so far few politicians have backed this idea, potentially because of the vast electorate of mainly older generations who benefit from the sharp increases in housing prices. So essentially it's a hot potato to touch for a politician. Another key set of levers involves labor market and wage policies. Raising minimum wages and strengthening collective bargaining can directly lift incomes at the lower end and narrow this wage gap before tax. In Denmark, however, there is no minimum wage, but wages have nevertheless increased due to high demand. Just think about how expensive it is to get a plumber these days. Also, since the effective unemployment rate is very low, we should be fairly certain that the pressure on wages is actually upwards going. Public support for policies boosting wages tend to be strong because they tackle inequality at the source rather than fixing it later through redistribution, according to the OECD. A third pillar is public investment in human capital, especially early education, lifelong training, and skills development. OECD research shows that broad access to quality education is consistently part of the most effective packages for inclusive growth. Investing in education expands opportunities and reduces inequality of outcome over the long term by enabling workers to adapt and compete. However, education and upskilling is already available for free to the Danish workforce, so Denmark might need to look elsewhere. Another option is for the state to spend more on welfare. Public spending on health, childcare, and social services also reduces financial risk for lower income households and strengthens social mobility. For several decades, though, it seems that the overall quality of welfare has fallen in Denmark, but that's a contested topic among Danes and politicians, so I'll just leave it there. Many of these above-mentioned measures are more effective when combined. Tax benefit policies alone matter, but they work best alongside labor, education, and housing reform in a cohesive strategy. Put together, a policy mix that balances productivity growth and equity can reduce inequality without slowing economic dynamism. The challenge for policymakers, though, is not the absence of options, it's the trade-offs and priorities in implementation. In closing, even countries like Denmark, known for equality, are feeling the pressures of global economic forces. Understanding how income and wealth are distributed matters because it affects daily life, from housing costs to job security to long-term prosperity. Comment below with your thoughts on inequality and subscribe for more insights on the forces shaping our economy here in Denmark. Have you felt the inequality gap widen for you or your close ones? Let us know what you think in the comments below.